So we're now going to talk to Dr. David Rose from the University of Sydney, who's the developer of the literacy program called Reading to Learn, which is being implemented widely in Sweden, throughout Europe, and it began in Australia, and it's being used in many countries around the world. So Dr. Rose, maybe you could just tell us exactly what is Reading to Learn. Is it a reading strategy or a set of classroom resources? Exactly what is it?
Well, it's a methodology for embedding literacy in classroom practice at all levels of education and across the curriculum. So it's a lot more than a bunch of strategies.
All right then, and so how do you work with teachers to implement these, the process in schools?
Okay, well, Reading to Learn, the other side of Reading to Learn is it's a highly developed professional learning program for teachers. It involves a great deal of new knowledge about language and about pedagogy, and this is teachers are guided into this practice through a series of face-to-face workshops and followed by in-class practice. So it's a staged professional learning curriculum that delivers knowledge about pedagogy, delivers knowledge about language, gives teachers guidance for implementation in the classroom and measures their students' growth.
And what was the motivation for you to get involved in developing this approach to literacy education?
Well, it began with working with Indigenous students in Australia, who, as many people would be aware, of tragic outcomes, educational outcomes, and we needed to develop a literacy program that was going to work effectively with these children, which we did in the late 90s in collaboration between the University of Canberra, University of Sydney, and schools in South Australia, and children who were not reading, who were still reading at junior primary levels by the end of in high school, learned to read at age-appropriate levels within a year, and that of course attracted a lot of attention nationally. One key organisation being the Catholic Education of Melbourne, who had a marvellous middle years program run by Claire Acevedo, and formed a proving ground for us to extend this methodology to work with teachers and students across sectors in the mainstream.
So this is really effective in mainstream classrooms. It's not just a typical withdrawal or intervention type of program?
No, it's actually very specifically not a withdrawal program. I mean, it's possible to use these strategies with students outside of the classroom, but we discovered that the problems that Indigenous students suffer are in fact the problems that a great many students suffer in all classes, all schools. And it's not just a small group, it's a continuum from the most to least successful students. So the fundamental problem that we needed to overcome was the inequality in the classroom, the inequality in participation and outcomes that all teachers have to deal with. And we needed to develop strategies for teachers to be able to teach all their students equally.
So with the good results you've had for low achieving students in the classroom, would you like to comment on how teachers can also meet the needs, or can they meet the needs at the same time of the students that are making good progress and even their high achieving students, while focusing on accelerating their disadvantaged students?
Well, that's precisely what they need to be able to do. Teachers need to be able to teach all of their students to be able to extend the top students at the same time as they're raising the levels of the weaker students. Now, the methodology makes explicit what the top students do intuitively, in other words, to be able to recognise patterns in written text and use those patterns themselves. Now, if you make an intuitive skill conscious, it's going to raise the level of skills. So we find that the top students accelerate on average at 1.5 times standard learning rates, while the weaker students are accelerating at 4 times standard learning rates. So it simultaneously advantages all students in the class. And this is actually predicted by research. So John Hattie's meta data.
So I wonder if you could just outline for me what kinds of demands the Reading to Learn professional development and then the classroom implementation would place on teachers and indeed on schools if people are going to undertake this program to improve outcomes for their students.
Well, the methodology does involve some significant changes in teaching practice. One of those is that we're teaching the curriculum content through reading. That means that we're bringing reading texts into the classroom and working with them explicitly. And we're guiding students to write successfully, and that involves a lot of new knowledge about language. That means that teachers need to be able to commit to a professional learning, and then they need time for planning, for text selection, and time to practice this in the classroom and become confident and competent. But the outcomes are such that ultimately it is enormously time-saving, because very rapidly students become independent learners.
And so what would you see overall as benefits schools could expect if they take on this program?
The benefits that schools can expect, first of all, significant improvements in their overall literacy and learning outcomes. They find improvements in behaviour in the classroom, because students who were formerly struggling are achieving success. Teachers find benefits in terms of the pleasure involved in teaching. It's much more pleasurable to be teaching successful students. Sorry?